All right, here we go. All right. Welcome, everyone. I'm Candace Nelson, a teaching and learning specialist here at St. Leo University's Center for Teaching and Learning Excellence. And I'm so excited to welcome you to this episode of our podcast here. Today, I'm joined by Dr. Keya Muhkerjee, an inspiring educator, innovator, and a valued member of our Faculty Fellows Cohort 2. Dr. Muhkerjee has been leading transformative work in AI collaboration with graduate students in the MSID program. In this conversation, we'll explore how the journey has unfolded through the lens of Rogers' theory of diffusion and adoption, from course design to student engagement and the real-world impact of integrating AI into teaching and learning. Hi, Dr. Muhkerjee. To start us out, can you describe your research for us and tell us a bit about why you decided on this topic?
Sure. Thank you, Candace. And so how I got into it, it all started, of course, there's a general interest for me in AI, which is why I applied, and Faculty Fellows was a big incentive to be able to do this and justify it. So once that first we crossed that first bridge of getting into Faculty Fellows, I said, okay, now I'm going to start. I already had an idea about what I was going to do with my graduate students in the MSID program for them to use AI to collaborate on their assignments. I decided I was going to make this like a case study research because the number of students in the class is a small cohort of like 4 students, but they have been moving as a cohort for I think pretty much from the beginning, at least the first two or after the first 2 or 3 courses, they have stuck together. So it's kind of like having a little cohort model, and so they know each other very well. They communicate. They're like a true cohort, basically. So I thought that okay, I will do a case study research using 4 courses total, 2 in the fall of 2024 and 2 in in the spring of 2025. So we did 4 courses, and the goal was to take the existing assignments, which are for a from from an MSID standpoint, they are very, very workplace oriented. And so they have a practitioner's approach to this. So what I wanted to do was have these assignments kind of built in that AI collaboration piece. So since these are workplace oriented, practitioners oriented, they would then, if they were doing the work in the workplace, they would had some experience of doing AI integration in a pretty safe environment. So that's how that AI integration happened. And I didn't build new courses, I mean, new assignments. I took the existing assignments and found a place for AI integration, and then turned it into a case study research.
Well, that's fantastic. So you were able to just take what you already had and then combine it with AI to make
Exactly.
something, give them a new experience altogether. Um, so what were your expectations about how students would respond to that AI integration when you first came to this project?
As students of instructional design, they are mm, very tech friendly. They know a lot of stuff. They've learned a lot of stuff, and also the by the time the courses in the fall of 2024, they were already 50% way into their program. So they are naturally have an inclination towards technology. So my expectations were that they would be super happy to have this permission to collaborate. They don't have to like fake it. They don't have to do it. It was like an open. I told them it's open. I want to know what you found out. You need to know what you can find out so that you can be ready that when you're in the workplace, you can say, yeah, I know how to do this, and you can do it in a very frank and open and experience, so that it's more a conversation, a feedback when we get to the actual assignment. So that's how the expectations were pretty high.
How did it actually pan out? What did they think?
The panning out was slightly different because there were four students, like I said. So student one, when I did the research, I kind of had them coded as student one, two, three, four. Student one was an early adopter of the technology. He is very much into all forms of technology, and he's also he works as an advanced level instructional designer in the corporate world, so he has a lot of experience. So he was very good, but in terms of the adoption, the student number two and through three, who I coded, had a kind of like a mixed reaction. They didn't necessarily go in like student one, way, wow, wonderful, but they were
Yeah.
a little unsure, but because they was no, but they knew I kept encouraging them. I kept telling them, in the beginning, I think the first assignment, they didn't even use it. They just used the traditional way of doing things. So, but soon enough, student number three found a that her workplace started talking about that about AI integration into the workplace, and all of a sudden, what Rogers talks about relevance came in. It suddenly became. She said she was using it in her personal life, which probably many of us do, but she wasn't using it because as graduate students and 50% way into the program, they have their set way of doing things. And this was like a perception was there that it was adding an extra layer of work. I can come up with, if there was an interview assignment, so they said like, okay, why do I need to ask AI to come up with interview questions? I know how to do it. So that's an example of why they thought it was an extra uh, layer of work. So student number two and three, they were in the, but they, by the time spring came along, they were in the early majority. They were doing it well. And also in the beginning, I had not mandated which to use. I just mentioned that Copilot is now part of St. Leo's system, so they could safely use it. But if they were comfortable or had a paid version of ChatGPT or Gemini or whatever, if they were comfortable, the idea was not the brand. The idea was that they use the technology. So so they pretty much stayed on ChatGPT, those two, Copilot and Gemini a little bit. The gung ho student was, of course, like using a lot of things. I mean, as the semesters went on, the assignments progress, there were like tools. Oh, I tried this, but it didn't do it. So I went and found another tool, and et cetera, et cetera. So student four was my most interesting case study, part of the case study, because he's a senior instructional designer also, but in the military. And, they have definitely their set um, way of doing things. Like it's hard to get them to get out of for example, an ADDIE instructional design model. They will, because that's what they are required to do. And I understand that. So that if I'm going to stay in this industry, they don't see a need to learn different model, because that's how. But anyway, he
Yeah.
was interesting, not because he couldn't use it, not because he was not tech savvy enough to do anything. He's done all kinds of other, but he had a personal belief against the use of AI. He kind of said that it has, at his comment, which I'll read to you, is he said, I would use AI if it was not an existential threat to workers around the world. It is not the same as calculators or computers. It does discourage critical thinking, analysis, and creativity, and often does not provide answers you actually need. It cannot replace actual research, and it is only as good as what is available, as well as what the User prompts. I truly believe that use of AI can result in a plateau in human ingenuity and development. So you can see he's very strongly biased against using it. So it's not that he's not capable of using it, because he used it because it was a assignment requirement. He did it. But for with each assignment, they had to write a reflection piece about what they did, how they did, why they did it, and what they learned
Mhm.
from doing it. And this kind of sentiment was almost always. So out of the four students, we had an early adopter who came in, but because they are a cohort and they talk to each other a lot during the week about assignments and things, there was user one was definitely a peer opinion leader who was able to influence somewhat to get at least the other two on on that early majority level, but the number four was more a late majority, I call it, because he did it, but it was almost like the proverbial had to do it, mm, so I'm going to do it, that.
Yeah, I think that what I find really interesting about it is that because when you said you were going to integrate this into your courses, I'm like, oh my gosh, they're going to love it. Like you said, MSID program, we're always doing something with the tech. We
Absolutely.
want to see what it can do. But they really spanned the whole spectrum. And I thought it was interesting that, the middle group was like not quite sure until their job wanted them to do it. And then it's like, okay, other people are doing it. I feel more comfortable doing it. It's
Yes.
safer for me.
Safer for
And then
me.
you have
Might
the,
be in a job security issue, if somebody's
yeah,
gonna do it and I'm not going to do it. So it was also kind of that, Roger talks about in term when he talks about adoption, not only talks about, being relative, the relevance part of it, or that it's compatible to my life or my job, in this case, the job, that it's not too complex. And but this one thing he mentions is observing others do it. That's where that opinion leadership and all that comes in, because you see others doing it, it piques your interest, and you say, okay, let me give it a try. So that is an important, I think, was an important aspect of how this diffused. And I think even though they were four students, a small microcosm, which is what made the case study research methodology kind of work. But I think if this was even 25 students or 30 students, this is normal distribution. This is what a population can respond to. We may see this even in our faculty and all other students, that not everybody is thinking that, oh, this is such a fantastic method and it's going to cut my workload down. Like these students said, it didn't necessarily cut their workload down. So it's the findings in the end were surprising, but also not surprising, because if a tech savvy, tech friendly group like instructional designers gave me this kind of results, I would think that we could see this in other groups as well.
yeah, that would be interesting to study and to see.
With faculty, maybe. Yeah.
I was thinking about like their workplace, and it really seemed as you were talking that had a significant influence on their opinions. Specifically, like I'm thinking like the one you had the group that they started using it, so you want to keep that job security. But then you have in the military, they're very like they wanted things done like a very certain way and in a certain style. Do you think that that had more of an influence on their perceptions of using the AI, or do you think that there may have been other factors that had more of an influence?
Well, with user four, as I said, he has such strong bias that even though he also mentioned that they were beginning to use it in his uh, work context, but because he has such a strong bias, he would probably have a harder time. adapting to it, you know. But I think that user one is not a problem. He's doing it. He's already done it in his workplace. He's really on the top there. But the other two, I think definitely the workplace, because I think, getting AI to, get advice on a birthday party card is, or a theme, is one thing, or find me a recipe is one thing, but the workplace is a whole other thing. And if there is acceptance in the workplace, that you should know, and that's like, and we talked about, if there's an interview question and they at a job interview and they said, what experience do you have with AI? Whether or not that workplace is, actively jumped into AI, but they may just even want to know where you are with AI. So having at least some knowledge on how to use it is, I think, and that I think the age group that they are is they are still in the job market. So I think that's definitely an influence, because other than user force strong personal beliefs against it, nobody else mentioned. When I mean, they said they used it personally, like I said, many of us can query ChatGPT or Copilot for something, but
Yeah. It's great at making recipes with whatever you have in your
yeah,
kitchen, firsthand experience.
I planned a
But
birthday party for a 6-year-old.
oh yeah.
Yeah.
How has the experience shaped your approach to teaching with these emergent technologies? So like considering like the diffusion curve you found, and how do you think that will shape your approach to teaching from here on out?
As an instructor, and somebody who has dealt with technology in the classroom for, I don't know, a couple decades or more, since technology in the classroom was whatever, we saw those phases from computers in education, microcomputers in education, enhancing learning, and with enhance, I mean, all of those stages. Excuse me. And I'm talking about K-12, but it doesn't matter. Not, I mean, beyond K-12 in the college realm, we this technology integration has gone through definitely stages and phases, right? And now we are, so having dealt with so much of this, one thing I would consistently have seen, that whether technology or another innovation, you cannot, a top-down approach, forcing it on people, is always a backfire. Because mm, if people don't see, like, what those attributes from Rogers are about, if they don't see it as relevant, or if they don't see it as it's impacting my life in a positive way, they're less likely to use it. So from that point of view, I would say that in fact, in terms of it, whenever I think about, that's why, first of all, that's why all the assignments in the MSID program are practitioners oriented. There is hardly, I don't know, maybe I can find one where they're writing a paper kind of a thing, but mostly they've developed skill sets which to take to the workplace. So whenever you use technology, or in this case AI, you have to think about the big why question. Why am I doing this? How would my students benefit? Just because it's available, I mean, it's one thing to play in the sandbox, it's another thing to have adopters, you know.
Yeah.
So so that why question is important. So if you have a clear picture of why am I doing this way, you'll be able to communicate, and the students will understand. But otherwise, if it is just busy work that you're giving them to query ChatGPT or Copilot and come up with something else, then they are they'll do it because it's an assignment, but it's probably not going to be as what you may have intended. So if you have to really identify who your learners are, what they need in that particular course, and maybe not all courses are need to have AI integration, you know. There are courses because we know some of the limits of AI. So 10, 15, 20 years down the road, it might be a different picture, but we have to function in the now, knowing the limits. So knowing that not all courses will lend itself. So pick and choose the ones where mm, you would do it. You know, even from the four courses I did, I kind of did it because I was doing faculty fellows, and I wanted to have as much data as possible to share. There's at least one course, which is uh, for example, the diffusion course. You know,
Yeah.
uh, they did because I told them to do it. But in my mind, that why question was not clear. In the other ones, I wanted them to try AI to build an instructional design document or a storyboard or a persona, things that they're more likely to tap into AI for. But to learn about, so I had to be clever, and I in that course, the diffusion course, I used it only partially for like case studies, like case study analysis and so on, like feed the case study into AI, provide the questions, see what responses you get. And a lot of those responses were, I'm getting generic types because they're learning to communicate with AI platforms. Some are more were like, oh, I generated an image or I did this. All of that was different. So that's why we have to know. And I would suggest, as always, like very basic teaching is when you create an assignment, do it yourself first to see if you can't do it, then understand that your students can do it. So, and that's very basic to teaching, planning, teaching, and activities. So, I would suggest that if I would be in my own teaching, I would be mindful about where I'm using it and why I'm using it.
I really like that a lot with the why question, because after teaching, in high school, that's usually the first question they ask me is, why are we doing this?
Why are we doing
You
this?
know?
Yeah, why? And you have to have a better
Yeah.
answer than it's good for you. That's not an answer. So that's why if you go through an assignment that you have built or you want to try yourself, get into that student mode, do it yourself, see, do you like what you're getting? And if with your, as a faculty at the higher level of hopefully critical thinking than maybe some of my students, if I am not getting the desired results, it's very unlikely that they are, and they could maybe benefit from just the traditional method. And you can guide them into say that if you may, these are some things you can ask Chat GPT, and these are some things you're not likely to get a good response. So
Yeah.
facts and figures, some of those kinds of that kind of knowledge is maybe some what's that procedural knowledge, of course, but also the facts and figures. I'm forgetting the words right now. That you're more likely to get help from if you need a historical date, if you need to know how to bake a cake. Those are you're going to get maybe more accurate or answers or things that you might like. But if you're querying it for critical thinking, then not that you won't always like it, but you may find it, which is what a lot of times my students said, that they were not either too general, they couldn't, they did it, but they eventually had to. And then this term, I had an interesting experience with a student. It's beyond faculty fellows, of course, and she asked me, if she could for that particular, it was a discussion prompt, and she said, "Can I use AI to?" I said, "Sure." And then she said, "It's amazing because it gave me, I knew about this framework, but when I applied it, it was applying to a case study. She said, when I applied it, it gave me so many more details that I wasn't thinking about. So I was able to modify my response to the discussion. The case study was part of a discussion post that I was able to modify it based on what it told me."
So she did all the work up front and then asked for more from,
Yeah.
like, that works really well with them. And I think it's a good comparison to what you said a minute ago, where if you just query it for a critical thinking question, just point blank, it's going to give you just generic
Things.
draft,
Yeah.
basically. And that's probably going to make more work for you.
Good for you. And you're going to be disappointed. Like, oh, I thought AI was great, but it didn't do it. And by the way, this is user number three who saw the job, who mentioned that her job was the impetus for her trying AI. So this was these students are again continuing on. So this is the one who now, it wasn't even part of the assignment, but she asked me, "Can I use AI?" I said, "Sure, but just let me know in the reflection what so she gave me what she got from AI and then what she built on it, and that's when she told me that she already knew some of this, but the details is not what she was thinking about in relation to solving a case.
It's
That
really
was very
cool. And I like that
uh,
you told her, like, sure, she's open enough with you because you've had this experience that she's just going to reach out to you and ask point blank. She doesn't feel walled off or anything. She's just like, hey, can I do this? And then like adding it to the reflection, like just explain yourself. I think that that's a really good way to kind of open them up to using it, but not in a way that's going to be academically dishonest,
yeah.
uh, and gets
and
them
and
thinking
I
about how
think
they're
this
using it.
came from, she was part of all the four courses. So it's like building. It's like not doing it as much, then doing it, and now on our own, there is no more requirement about use AI. But so it's getting them, that's that comfort zone, getting them to be the adopter, that curve. It takes time for adoption to happen. When we adopt a new innovation, if you're already ahead of the game, it'll be like, oh, I've been waiting for this to happen, so I'm gonna jump on this. But not everybody is there. So, but that slow, steady pace of adoption. So again, this was an eye opener for me, that student number three tried it on her own this time.
Oh, that's so good.
It is very good. Yeah.
What advice would you give to other educators who maybe want to introduce AI in a thoughtful way, but they may not have that cohort
Model.
structure to theirs, that model? So if, they just have one group of students that they see one time throughout their career, what kind of advice would you give them to help them on that like adoption journey?
Would say pretty much what we just talked about a moment ago. I would say if they are not able to necessarily depend on their peers or others, you have to be there. You have to create that because it's something new. It's something new for you, and it's something new definitely for the student. So you have to be mindful of that. You cannot just give an assignment and step back and say, I'll see you when I grade your work. You have to say, I'm there. Do we need to schedule a session in my office? Do I need to do something on Zoom that we can? You have to do some hand holding to keep them motivated, to keep them not frustrated, because there's frustration moments with using anything, learning anything new. So and maybe since there is an honest communication, um, you know, I would say not be as punitive, to students, and because um, academic dishonesty, when you are part of helping them learn, is not dishonesty. It's an honest way of learning. As long as we all know about all the relevant things to do, about the citations, about the reflections, about the ownership, which is what I had my students do. I got this from AI, and give me the piece that you got me from AI. Show me the piece that you did yourself. And I think that that helps them understand that difference between, first of all, honesty and dishonesty. Um, just because I use my calculator, I'm not being dishonest, but it's the same thing, but I have to say, okay, if it depends on how I'm using my calculator to say, I use my calculator to figure this out. We often do it if I have let's say, something complex to look at, and I say, okay, I just let me use my calculator. That's already a disclaimer. I'm not using my own mental math. But same thing, I would say, being patient, being supportive, being positive about um, the work that they are doing, helping them move. So you have to see them, you're taking them on this journey. So you have to move them, move with them, be the guide, be the kind of like the GPS. You say, by the end, maybe this is the next stop, this is where we're going. So give them that, especially I would think with, it's the same analogy I drew from doing instructional technology. Just because students use cell phones and computers a lot, they don't know how to work with Excel necessarily. Just because they can query ChatGPT and make, I don't know, whatever they're making, uh, doesn't mean they can use it for academic purposes without proper guidance. So they are tech savvy, but to use tech savvy so that it benefits them and it's a learning experience for them, it takes teachers to be very what should I say? Take a more guided guidance kind of an approach. Be the guide, not the what do you call it? Heavy-handed approach to teaching.
Yeah. I think that that's really good advice because my favorite thing about what you just said was like they know how to query ChatGPT, but they don't necessarily know how to use it academically. So their intentions may not be to quote unquote cheat. I'm not saying they are all, not doing that on purpose, but they may not even know how to use it
Yeah.
properly. So
And
to like purposely help them.
purposely help them so they understand, the be the like I said, be the guide for them, instead of
Mhm.
thinking that they know about all of this, they know about all of this, but they did it anyways. And if you can detect it, I almost have to believe that's a smaller number of students who are trying to be deceptive rather than a large number of students are more willing to learn. And if you can be the guide for them, and again, with our teaching backgrounds, Candice, we know that about the teacher as the coach, the teacher as the guide. The teacher is not just the person as the lecturer.
Yeah.
Those kinds of positive models are needed to push any innovation forward. I think some of those basic teaching models is something that needs to be introduced into integration of anything that's new, but I would particularly say AI because it's here, there, everywhere, you know.
Yeah, and it's becoming like you said, everywhere. It literally pops up when I open my computer. Hey, Copilot. It's
Exactly. But
everywhere.
you can't, your Microsoft Word no longer just a blank page. You have a Copilot trying to have a communication with you. So it's like it's so in I think our students need, and because I dealt with graduate students who are definitely in their age and experience, a little more advanced than undergraduate students. So they are more savvy about a lot of usage and how to work with it. But I think the younger our students are, they just have an awareness that AI exists. And like I said, they have probably used AI for silly things, and but now that this is a very, very powerful tool that you can use for your academic work, but you have to know how to use it. You have to know how to be able to work with it so that it can help you, and have an open communication with the instructor. That's what the instructor's role is. The student's role is definitely there, but the instructor has to be in that coaching, guiding um, mm, mode of teaching.
Do you think that there's like a teaching like strategy that kind of could broadly apply to everybody that they might can use to integrate AI? Maybe if they're not comfortable with it, but they know they need to teach their student, or like some sort of teaching strategy that they could possibly use.
Again, I mean, not everybody is in that. Either they are aware, or they or may not. If just because you're aware doesn't mean you have the skills to be a coach
Hmm.
or a guide kind of a model. A lot of teachers are subject matter experts. They know their subject very well, and they're very good at maybe teaching that subject matter. But now you're looking at something different. You're looking at so you have to first as a before you can use it as a teaching strategy, you have to embrace it as a yourself, in terms of more than personal use, like my user number 2 and 3 were doing. They were using it for their personal use, whatever those were. But it took baby steps, which is why I said when you create an assignment. Well, first of all, I think I would suggest that at St. Leo we create a cohort of people who are using it, who have become opinion leaders. We have to find those opinion leaders. So they can be in the administration who can support ventures, but I think the peers. So many of us have gone through the faculty fellows program, and making and having like this podcast, but or uh, other ways that the information goes out into the community, that here is a person that I can reach out to who has done this. And it doesn't always have to be Candace Nelson. It can
Yeah.
be, so many of us have now done so many things in the using AI integration and learned from it, that we all can be that helping hand. So first of all, creating that community of support. That community of inquiry and support. I don't know how to do this, but I see that you guys, mm, our names probably should be published there, so they can see that, okay, I don't know, but I can make a community of inquiry or a support community that I can go to for my questions. And that would be one to start there. And then I don't ever use an assignment that I haven't tried myself,
Yeah.
because it's going to, again, that's maybe classroom teaching experience, that when you do an activity and you have not really flushed it out yourself, even with no students in the classroom, you can just fall on your face with that, because so many things can go wrong. So I would always suggest that start small, reach out to the community of support, the inquiry, start small, try it out yourself, and use the rubric. Grade yourself. Pretend you're a student and say, how would I grade this assignment? You know, if you can grade your assignment and let's say not give it flying colors, then you have to rethink, like, what can I do? Because our goal is to have our students succeed, not for them to fail, not to trick them. So if I couldn't do it with flying colors, then how do I get, what do I need to do to this assignment so they can do it, they feel successful and so on.
I think that all of that is really, really good advice. So thank you so much for talking with me today. And it was really cool hearing about all of your research with the diffusion and adoption of AI within the MSID course. And I kind of look forward to seeing what else you do with it.
Yeah, let's see. We'll see how it goes, and there is the final course, which is the capstone course. So we'll see how they're at all going to use it because it is related to a workplace context. So it'll be interesting to see that.
It really would be. Maybe we'll have to come back for a part two when that's
Yeah,
done
sure.
and talk about how it went.
We can do that. Thank you, Candace. Thank you for
No problem.
having me and doing the interview. Take care.
No
Good night.
problem. You